Most people think wealth is about money. It's not. Money is just the scoreboard. Real wealth starts in your head, long before it shows up in your bank account. The difference between the average and the top 1% isn't intelligence, luck, or background. It's how they think, what they prioritize, and what they're willing to delay while everyone else chases comfort. The average person spends their life trying to look rich. The top 1% spend their life trying to become free. That's the first mental shift. If your goal is applause, you'll stay broke. If your goal is cash flow and control, you'll build something that lasts. The wealthy don't buy things to impress people they don't know. They buy assets that quietly pay them every month while nobody's watching. Look closely and you'll notice something uncomfortable. Most people are rich in opinions and poor in ownership. They work harder every year, yet own nothing that works for them. The top 1% see ownership as oxygen. They don't ask, how much does this job pay? They ask, what do I own at the end of this? Equity beats effort when effort has an expiration date. They also understand something most people don't want to hear. Salary is capped. Ownership isn't. No matter how good you are, your time has limits. That's why the top 1% build systems instead of depending on hustle alone. Businesses, investments, and leverage become extensions of their effort. 1 hour of work today creates value that compounds tomorrow. That's how you escape the treadmill. Here's where patience separates the wealthy from the desperate. The top 1% think in decades, but they act daily. They don't rush outcomes, but they move with urgency. Every day has structure. Every decision has intention. While others wait for motivation, they rely on discipline. While others quit when results are slow, they double down on execution. They aren't obsessed with getting rich quick. They're obsessed with building things that don't break. Slow money that compounds beats fast money that disappears. They accept boredom if it leads to stability. They accept pressure if it leads to leverage. And they understand that consistency is louder than intensity. Before the money shows up, skills show up first. Real wealth follows rare value. The top 1% become dangerous with skills that move money and people. They learn how to sell when others complain about selling. They learn how to negotiate when others avoid conflict. They learn how to allocate capital when others spend it. Skills create income. Income creates assets. Assets create freedom. They invest in learning the same way most people invest in entertainment. While others scroll, they study. While others relax, they refine. Not because they're obsessed, but because they understand that ignorance is expensive. The market doesn't reward effort, it rewards usefulness. Fear doesn't disappear at the top, but it changes roles. For most people, fear is a stop sign. For the top 1%, fear is information. If something feels uncomfortable, they investigate it instead of avoiding it. They don't take reckless risks, but they refuse to stay safe in places that keep them small. They ask better questions. What's the downside? Can it be limited? What's the upside if this works? Can it scale? Risk isn't something to eliminate, it's something to manage. Comfort feels good, but it quietly charges interest on your future. One of the biggest lies about wealth is that it's about stuff. Cars, watches, houses. That's the surface level reward. Real wealth is about control. Control over your time, control over your environment, control over who you work with and what you tolerate. The top 1% don't build wealth to consume more. They build it to need less permission. They design their lives backward. First comes freedom, then money supports it. They know the most expensive thing in life is being forced to say yes when you want to say no. True wealth is waking up without anxiety. It's choosing your priorities instead of inheriting them. Most people wait for confidence before they act. The top 1% act until confidence shows up. They don't need perfect conditions, perfect timing, or perfect plans. They move, adjust, and learn faster than everyone else. Momentum beats perfection every time. And here's the hard truth. Thinking like the top 1% will isolate you. Your goals will sound extreme. Your patience will look boring. Your discipline will feel unnecessary to people who don't see the long game. But wealth isn't built by consensus. It's built by conviction. If you want real wealth, stop asking how fast it can happen and start asking how strong it can become. Stop chasing noise and start building leverage. Stop consuming and start owning. Because when you think like the top 1%, money stops being the goal and becomes the tool that buys your freedom. Most people spend their money trying to be seen. The top 1% spend their money trying to be paid. That single difference changes everything. Status is loud, flashy, and temporary. Cash flow is quiet, boring, and relentless. One drains you the moment you buy it, the other feeds you every single month whether you show up or not. Status purchases feel good for a moment because they signal success to the outside world. but they come with a hidden tax, maintenance, pressure, and the need to keep earning just to hold on to them. The top 1% understand this trap early. They don't confuse looking rich with being wealthy. They know the fastest way to stay broke is upgrading your lifestyle before upgrading your income streams. Cash flow does something status never can. It buys you time. When money comes in without you constantly trading hours for it, your decisions change. You stop taking bad deals out of desperation. You stop tolerating environments that drain you. You stop living paycheck to paycheck, even if the paycheck is big. That's why boring assets win. Businesses, equity, rentals, royalties, things that don't impress at parties but quietly cover your life. The top 1% are willing to look average today to live exceptional tomorrow. They delay gratification while everyone else rushes to display it. They'll drive the same car, live below their means, and reinvest aggressively because they understand one rule: income that repeats is more powerful than income that spikes. Flashy money fades. Recurring money compounds. They also know that status is usually rented, not owned. Trends change, tastes shift, applause disappears. But cash flow stacks. It compounds. It builds resilience. When the economy tightens, the person with assets survives while the person with image panics. That's why the wealthy aren't impressed by logos. They're impressed by margins. Eventually, something interesting happens. Cash flow creates optionality. And optionality is the real flex, the ability to walk away, to wait, to choose. At that point, status becomes irrelevant, because when you're paid quietly and consistently, you don't need to prove anything to anyone. Most people are taught to chase a higher salary like it's the finish line. Get the raise, get the promotion, negotiate a little more per hour and call it progress. The top 1% see that game for what it is: limited upside with a hard ceiling. A salary can make you comfortable, but it rarely makes you free. Ownership changes the math. When you own, your effort doesn't disappear at the end of the day. It compounds, it lives on. The top 1% don't ask how much they'll be paid for their time, they ask what they'll own if they win. Equity, profit share, assets, control, these outlive any paycheck. They understand that time is the most expensive input. You can only sell it once. Even a great salary is still a trade, hours for income. Miss a day, income stops. Ownership breaks that dependency. When systems generate value without your constant presence, your leverage increases. One decision can pay you for years instead of weeks. This is why they were willing to earn less upfront if it means owning more long-term. They'll take equity over bonuses. They'll build businesses instead of climbing ladders. They'll acquire assets that grow while they sleep, not because, it's easy, but because it's asymmetric. The upside is uncapped. They also know ownership sharpens thinking. When you own something, you care differently. You watch expenses. You focus on margins. You think in systems, not tasks. Employees think about execution. Owners think about durability. That mindset alone separates average earners from real wealth builders. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Salary feels safe, but it's fragile. You can be replaced. Markets shift. Companies change direction. Ownership carries risk, but it also carries control. And control is what creates security in the long run. The top 1% don't reject salaries. They just refuse to stop there. They use income as fuel, not the destination. Because they know that when you own the asset, the money keeps coming, even when you're not. Most people want fast results and easy days. The top 1% flip that equation. They want hard days and lasting results. They're willing to suffer in the short term if it buys them leverage in the long term. That's why their progress looks slow at first, and then suddenly unstoppable. Long-term thinking gives them patience. They don't panic when results lag. They don't quit because a month was quiet or a quarter was tough. They know real wealth is built over years, even decades. Compounding doesn't show off early, but it rewards consistency brutally over time. They're not emotional about short-term noise because they're anchored to a much bigger horizon. But patience doesn't mean passivity. This is where most people get it wrong. While the vision is long-term, the execution is aggressive. Daily actions are tight, focused, and non-negotiable. They don't like it, they do it anyway. While others debate, plan, and procrastinate, they ship, test, and adjust. They move fast on small decisions so they can move slowly on big ones. They don't overthink sending the email, making the call, publishing the offer. Speed creates feedback, and feedback creates clarity. Momentum is built through action, not perfect strategy. They're also ruthless with their time. Short-term effort is protected fiercely because they know wasted days steal from future freedom. Distractions are cut without apology. Low-return activities are eliminated. Every hour is asked one question: does this move the long game forward or just make me feel busy? Emotionally, they're steady. Wins don't inflate them. Losses don't break them. Everything is data. Short-term pain is processed, learned from, and absorbed into a stronger system. That's how they stay in the game long enough for the long-term payoff to arrive. This combination, patience in vision, intensity in execution, is rare. Most people choose one and miss the other. The top 1% master both. They're calm about where they're going and relentless about what they do today. That's why, over time, their results look inevitable. Most people chase money before they're capable of holding it. The top 1% do the opposite. They focus on becoming valuable first, knowing money is just a byproduct of usefulness. Wealth doesn't show up because you want it. It shows up because you can solve problems at scale. Skills are leverage. One strong skill can outperform years of motivation. The top 1% deliberately build abilities that move people, resources, and decisions. They learn how to sell ideas, negotiate outcomes, lead teams, and allocate capital. These aren't flashy skills, but they compound faster than almost anything else. They also understand that skills stack. Each new ability multiplies the last. Sales plus communication creates influence. Influence plus systems creates scale. Scale plus discipline creates wealth. While others look for shortcuts, they quietly upgrade their capacity to win bigger games. Early on, they'll work harder than necessary just to learn faster. They take roles that teach them instead of roles that just pay them. They accept temporary discomfort in exchange for long-term advantage. Every challenge becomes training. Every failure becomes tuition. They treat learning like an investment, not a hobby. Books, mentors, experience, repetition. This is where their money and time go first. Entertainment is limited because ignorance costs more than boredom. While others wait to be ready, they practice until readiness is inevitable. When money finally arrives, it sticks. Because skills don't disappear in a downturn. Markets change, but competence transfers. The top 1% know that if they lose everything, they can rebuild. Because what made them wealthy wasn't luck, it was capability. Fear shows up for everyone. The difference is what you do when it arrives. Most people treat fear like a red light, something that tells them to slow down, stop, or turn back. The top 1% treat fear like a dashboard signal. It's information, not instruction. When they feel fear, they don't immediately retreat. They get curious. Why does this feel uncomfortable? What's actually at risk? Is the danger real, or is it just unfamiliar territory? The T-pause alone separates growth from stagnation. Fear usually appears right before expansion, not disaster. They understand that comfort is often a warning sign. If everything feels easy, familiar, and safe, it probably means you're not stretching into new value. The most profitable decisions often feel awkward at first. Raising prices, negotiating harder, stepping into leadership, putting your name on something public. Fear marks the edge of your current capacity. This doesn't mean reckless behavior. The top 1% don't ignore fear, they analyze it. They reduce downside, cap losses, and build safety nets. They ask how bad the worst-case scenario really is and how recoverable it would be. Most of the time, the cost of not acting is far greater than the cost of trying. They also train themselves to act with fear present. Waiting for fear to disappear is a losing strategy because it rarely does. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's forward motion despite it. Every time they act through discomfort, fear loses authority and becomes background noise. Over time, this creates confidence that can't be faked. Not because they believe nothing will go wrong, but because they trust their ability to handle it if it does. Fear stops being a barrier and starts being a compass, pointing them toward the places where growth, leverage, and opportunity live. Most people build their lives around spending, how much they can buy, show, upgrade, and consume. The top 1% build their lives around freedom. What they protect isn't their lifestyle, it's their optionality. Because once your life becomes too expensive, your choices disappear. Consumption feels like progress, but a quietly locks you in. Bigger bills mean more pressure. More pressure means fewer exits. The top 1% see this early and refuse to become prisoners of their own success. They're careful not because they can't afford more, but because they value control more than comfort. Freedom starts with time. Being able to decide when you work, who you work with, and what problems you solve. That's why they resist lifestyle inflation, even as income grows. They'd rather reinvest than upgrade, build buffers instead of obligations. What looks like restraint is actually strategy. They also design for mental freedom, fewer commitments, cleaner schedules, less noise. They know a cluttered life creates reactive thinking, and reactive thinking kills long-term wealth. Space to think is a competitive advantage, and they guard it aggressively. Eventually, consumption becomes optional instead of compulsive. When you're not trying to prove anything, buying things loses its emotional pull. At that point, money becomes a tool, not for validation, but for alignment. Spending supports values, not ego. This is the quiet truth about the top 1%. Their real wealth is invisible. It's the ability to walk away, to wait, to say no without panic. They don't consume to feel rich. They live free because they built wealth the right way. Real wealth isn't an accident, and it isn't reserved for a lucky few. It's the outcome of deliberate thinking repeated over time. The top 1% don't win because they know secrets. You've heard the principles. They win because they live them when others don't. They choose cash flow over clout, ownership over comfort, skills over shortcuts, and freedom over company. Consumption. They think long-term when it's boring. They act decisively when it's uncomfortable. They use fear as a signal, not an excuse. And most importantly, they design their lives so money serves them, not the other way around. That's the shift most people never make. If you take anything from this, let it be this. Stop measuring success by how things look and start measuring it by how much control you have. Control over your time, control over your decisions, control over your future. Because when you think like the top 1%, wealth stops being about accumulation and becomes about independence. The path isn't flashy, it's disciplined, patient, and often lonely. But it works. And if you commit to thinking this way long enough, one day you'll realize something powerful. You didn't just build money, you built freedom.